And now let's hear from Lorraine Petersen. Lorraine is Chief Executive of NASEN, a national organisation which aims to promote the education, training, advancement and development of all those with special and additional support needs. She's also a trustee of Ambitious about Autism and a governor at Treehouse School. Lorraine will be reflecting on what recent policy changes mean for people who work with children with SEN. Lorraine.
Thank you. Thank you. I also will be reading. I apologise. If I've got an hour, I'm fine, but 5 minutes is more challenging for me, for those who know me. With over 1/5 of our school population currently identified with special educational needs, an Ofsted report last year that was stating that there was an over-identification of children with special educational needs, which was due to poor teaching, and with the school's white paper and the Special Education Needs and Disability Green Paper, both identifying the need for more professional development within our workforce, I think this is an ideal time to address this issue is our workforce actually trained to meet the needs of our pupils. I don't actually believe that any teacher or teaching assistant or anybody working within the profession goes to school every morning to do a poor job. I actually think that a lot of the time they have been poorly trained and have just not got the skills they need to meet the needs of some of our young people, as Kean was saying. Within initial teacher education, both for our 3 and 4 year BEd students and for our PGCE students, there is a special educational needs and disability module. Unfortunately, it's not mandatory, it's optional. And so we could have teachers who are coming out into the profession who have had very, very little special educational needs and disability training. As a newly qualified teacher, you would take an induction programme, which would be very much about on-the-job training and through the local authority that you are working for. Again, it depends on the quality of that training and the school that you are actually working in. For those young teachers wishing to work in special schools or in specialist provision, there are now opportunities for placements during their practice in a special school, but they're still very limited, and it is still very difficult to secure a place in a special school as a newly qualified teacher. Those special schools that do take young teachers often have to offer bespoke training to meet the individual needs of the children within their school. This is something we do need to move towards. So as we move into a new school system where academies and free schools work alongside maintained schools, we need to address this situation. For the last 10 years or more, we have educated a profession to teach a national curriculum, a literacy and a numeracy strategy, with very clear and prescriptive guidance of what to teach, when to teach it, and how to teach it. As we move towards a more flexible and diverse educational system, will we have the workforce to meet their differing needs? More importantly, will we have the workforce to meet the needs of children with special educational needs within this very different system? If I was going for surgery, I would not be happy to be operated on by a surgeon who has had no professional development for 30 years. We actually do have teachers in front of our children who, for that is the exact case, that they will not have done, or they've done very little, if any, professional development, especially around teaching children with additional needs. We have teachers trained in 20th century teaching 20th century children, and I actually believe that we now have 21st century children, and we do not have a lot of teachers that have been trained to actually meet their needs. I also believe there is another question that we have to ask ourselves. Have we actually got an appropriate pedagogy that meets the needs of the children who are now being educated in our 21st century schools? And if we haven't, then we certainly have not got trained professionals to meet their needs. The workforce within a school has grown over many years. When I began teaching over 30 years ago, there was me and 30 children in a mainstream classroom. Now we have a much wider and more diverse workforce. For children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities, their main contact on a day-to-day basis in many mainstream schools will be a teaching assistant or a learning support assistant, who may be highly qualified or may have little or no qualification at all. The class teacher responsible for the planning and delivery of the curriculum may also be very highly qualified, but they also may have little or no training in the specific needs of the children in their classroom. The Green Paper proposes the removal of the stages School Action and School Action Plus and replaces them with a single stage assessment process. This will mean there will be more children and young people within mainstream classrooms who will have diverse and differing needs being taught by teachers who have not had the training to meet those needs. The removal of School Action Plus will reduce funding that schools receive to offer additional support for these young people. If this means a reduction in support staff, this will place even more pressure on the class teacher. Needs will not be identified appropriately, and children and young people will not receive the support they need to access the educational provision they are entitled to. Will this lead to a larger number of exclusions? Will this mean that parents will still have to fight to get their children's needs met? Yes, if we don't address the need to upskill our school workforce. Every mainstream school must have a SENCO, a Special Educational Needs Coordinator. And from September, they must be a qualified teacher. Can you believe that the person in a school who is leading on special needs up until this September did not have to be a qualified teacher? All new to role Special Educational Needs Coordinators have to have completed the National Award for SEN Coordination, and they are going to be key in ensuring the provision for mainstream pupils. The Green Paper proposes an Education, Health and Care Plan, as Virginia's already mentioned, which will replace the statement. In principle, I have no problem with this idea. All those children born with a disability or who have it identified in early childhood will get a plan and hopefully the provision that's behind that. What about all those children and young people for whom identification comes much later in their development, usually once they're coming to school? For the Education, Health and Care Plan to work, there needs to be multidisciplinary training for all three services to ensure there is a consistency and commitment to meet the needs of an individual through holistic provision. So in conclusion, what do we need to do to support the workforce to improve the outcomes for children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities? We need full multi-agency training. We need all leadership training within the profession to include special educational needs and disabilities. Governors must be required to understand SEND legislation and provision in their school. Initial teacher education should have a mandatory special educational needs and disability component, as should induction. Child development should be reintroduced into the curriculum for initial teacher education. There should be a mandatory requirement for all teachers to undertake a certain amount of hours of CPD each year. There should be an expectation that every school should have at least one session per year of their training on special educational needs and disability and inclusive practice. And the wider workforce needs to be trained in supporting young people with special educational needs and disability. It is an indisputable fact that if you get provision right for children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities, you will get it right for everyone. The changing educational climate gives us the ideal time to do something about it.
Thank you very much indeed, Lorraine.